Well, let's turn our attention to the country's oceans now. The National Sea Rescue Institute is calling on people to take extra care while out at the coastline. 5 people have already drowned at the sea. We understand the body of a 35-year-old man who went missing at Beachview in Port Elizabeth on Saturday has now been found. Let's get the latest. I'm joined by NSRI spokesperson Craig Lambinon, who's incredibly busy this time of the year. But Craig, you've made your way to our studios. Thank you very much indeed. And I always feel like every time you and I speak about safety at the oceans, it seems to fall on deaf ears. Is that unfair?
It's not unfair, and it is sadly the case is now that the tally is now up to 8 people that have drowned around the coast since Christmas Day, including Christmas Day, and that's obviously a tragedy that these preventable incidents have happened around our coastline.
Craig, I mentioned in my intro to you this 35-year-old man who went missing. I think it was in Beachview. The body's now been found. Any update on what happened there?
Yeah, so from what we understand is that they had gone fishing. The father, the son, and the nephew. The nephew managed to swim to shore, but it took him quite a while. It appears that they weren't wearing life jackets. They launched a small canoe, which is now washed up on the beach. The son's body was found on Monday, and sadly yesterday the father's body was found. And that really is a tragic incident, and our hearts are out to that family for their loss, especially over this time.
Explain to me what is happening as far as the NSRI's involvement in inland water activities are concerned. I think a lot of people, obviously because of the title that you have, the NSRI, the Sea Rescue Institute, many people don't realize the kind of work you do inland as well. Any major incidents there?
So there have been 2 incidents in inland rivers, although they're coastal rivers, at the Great Black River and also at the Palmit River. So we also urge people on inland waters to exercise caution. We do have rescue bases at Theewaterskloof Dam, Witbank, the Vaal Dam, Hartbeespoort Dam, and also Benoni. And the Benoni NSRI also assist police and fire rescue services with flash floods around the Johannesburg area, with swiftwater rescue. So we are also assisting in those cases, but we urge people to have a safety-conscious mindset around all waterway, and in fact even your swimming pool at home, which should have a cloak of safety around it.
Sadly this morning, Craig, I see at 9:20 on your website at the moment, a Krugersdorp man had died, I understand, from being part of a scuba diving expedition. Obviously not great understanding and knowing the precautions that even scuba divers go through. Another tragedy there.
Yeah, the causes are unknown. From what we understand is he stopped breathing while underwater scuba diving. He was very quickly recovered onto the dive charter boat. Those dive charter boats, particularly on the south coast, are very well geared. All of their crew are first aid trained. Immediately CPR was commenced. They alerted the NSRI ambulance services. NSRI police search and rescue responded to rendezvous with the boat on their arrival at Shelley Beach, where advanced life support CPR continued, and sadly that man has been declared deceased, and police have opened an inquest docket in that case.
Craig, every year, excuse me, you and I and many of my colleagues have this conversation with you about those, particularly at the big coastal areas. We're heading up to New Year's now. Obviously, we have images of thousands and thousands of people at Durban Main Beach, for example. It doesn't seem to matter how many lifeguards are on duty or how many Metro Police or officials are on duty. People still find themselves in trouble. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with the parents, but then also those in the water themselves.
Yeah, Gareth, the incidents that we've responded to since Christmas Day, most of them appear to have happened at beaches where lifeguards are not on duty. So our emphasis is to continue to urge the public to be at a beach, swim at a beach, when and where the lifeguards are on duty and in between their safety marcated swimming zones. But there are obviously going to be a lot of people on our beaches now over this, particularly this coming weekend, and with New Year's Eve approaching and the days after New Year's Eve. And we are urging the safety-conscious mindset, and for parents to be absolutely sure that their children have responsible adult supervision around all waterways.
Craig, I'm going to ask you about the number of deaths since Christmas Day in a moment. First of all, obviously you're watching weather very, very closely. What do the tides look like as we continue to head very quickly to the 1st of January?
Yeah, so the peak of the high tide continues to happen in the late afternoon, and that's a concern because it's in the late afternoon that people are taking that last dip into the surf before they go home for the evening. And that's the concern, that during that reduction from high tide to low tide, that's when the currents can be their strongest, and rip currents form at different places constantly throughout the day. So it's to be aware of those rip currents, and the rip currents continue to remain the greatest cause of drownings around the South African coastline.
Let's talk about that death toll over the past few days from the Christmas period. Craig, what sort of numbers are we looking at now?
So at this stage, the NSRI have attended to 8 cases of fatal drowning accidents, and we're hoping that is where we stand for the rest of this festive season. We're wishing everybody a safe New Year, and we're hoping that everybody goes to beaches and swims at beaches when and where the lifeguards are on duty, obey the instructions of the lifeguards, and have a safe time over this period. But everybody's on high alert, law enforcement, the police, the lifeguards that are physically manning the beaches, the NSRI volunteers around the country that are on alert to respond to emergencies, the provincial ambulance services, private ambulance services, and the fire and rescue services. It's our priority particularly at this time, is to make sure that everybody gets to the beach safely, enjoys their day on the beach, and goes home safely.
Craig, I just got someone on Twitter asking me a moment ago if you can explain what a rip tide is. I know you have answered this before, but perhaps new viewers tuning in for the first time now, not quite understanding what you mean by a rip tide. Explain to me what that is, and then why it's so dangerous, and then C, how do you get yourself out of it?
So as the waves reach the beach, the water has to find a way to get back out into the ocean again. It does that by forming a rip current, which is really the same as a river of water going through the surf. What it really does is the current itself looks for a gap between sandbanks and forms that river of water going back out to sea between those sandbanks, which are underwater and hidden. So rip currents aren't an easy thing to see unless you really know what you're looking for. If you're caught in a rip current, you'll know that you are because you're being swept out to sea faster than what you can swim back to shore. In that moment, don't panic. Simply stay afloat using your arms and legs in circular movements. That's treading water. Obviously, shout for help so that people on the beach can call the lifeguards. And if there are no lifeguards at that beach, they can contact the NSRI on our national emergency number 112. Stay afloat. As difficult as this sounds, let the rip current take you out to sea. While you stay afloat, at your first opportunity, swim parallel to the beachfront until you're free of the rip current, and then use the incoming waves to get back to shore. This whole process does take some time. If you stay afloat and you don't panic, you have a greater chance of survival.
Craig Lambinon, thank you very much indeed. Incredibly difficult task you and your team are going to have over the next few days, but as always, I appreciate your time in coming through to speak to us.